Hello, my friend. Today I would like to talk about enlightenment and awakening. Two beautiful words. I think there's a lot of misconception about what enlightenment is, what awakening is. And maybe it's not so important. Maybe those are just words. There is no clear-cut boundary for any step on the path. And the path never ends. And still, there are certain realizations, certain thresholds you can cross, certain insights. Now, enlightenment and awakening are often used interchangeably. The way I see it, these words speak of inner transformation and realization that can take place, and that once it has taken place is irreversible. Now, the way the outer world might appear, or the way you might appear in the world, and all these things that the body and the physical body and the emotional body manifest, all the baggage you have on your shoulders might still be there, but a certain inner knowing has occurred, and it cannot be taken away. It's like truth has come knocking at the door, and you've opened it a little bit, and it has shoved his foot in, and you try to close it again, but you cannot close it again. Adyashanti compared God to a salesman that does exactly that. You open the door unknowing, and then maybe you wish to close it again, but it cannot be closed again. Shoved his foot in the doorway, and you cannot close it again. So awakening, or self-realization would be another word, doesn't need to be, or is not, a big happening insofar as that it has to come along with a lot of bliss and light, even, inner light or joy or whatever. That's not the, I would say, not the way to really define it, or what is most important when talking about this. These things might happen, but they're not important. Awakening means you wake up from something. Self-realization means you realize what you are truly. Enlightenment means something opens up and you see the light, and they all mean the same thing. So, you wake up from the dream of being a separate identity. That also means you wake up from the dream that you are this body, or that you are a separate thing inhabiting this body. It means you realize you're not the small little self, also called the ego. You're something much more vast. You're the totality of being. Or another way to put it, you are consciousness, not the body. This is a happening. This can take place. And it's not a mental thing. It's not you think that. You really feel it. Might come with, or let's say, my teacher, or one of my teachers, Christian Meyer, he has been investigating this awakening process. And he stipulates that nearly always it takes place as a sort of falling and breaking through an inner boundary, and then I don't know, evaporating is the wrong word, dissolving, and like even feeling as if your body's boundaries dissolve and becoming one. The Tibetan Buddhists, they call this layer at the bottom that you can fall through the ground of being. And you can fall through that. In this image, and this is something that you can experience, this is something that I have experienced myself. Awakening and enlightenment is not something that takes place up. It's not a transcendence, it's a diving in and falling through, down. But whether up or down actually is not important. And some people might not experience it in that way. The important thing is this revelation that you are not the little me. This knowing that you aren't that. And this knowing being deeply felt. And with this knowing, already either the fear of dying of the physical body evaporates or it loosens up. And processes might come to be and might be kicked off that will take a longer time. So this is another big misconception, that enlightenment would have to mean you have this happening and then you're just soaking in bliss for the rest of your life. We have some examples where we think that the way the story is told, that it has to be like this. Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, or when we look at Ramana Maharshi, or modern teachers like Eckhart Tolle's recounting of his enlightenment experience, or Byron Katie, for example, or there are some people where it appears that there was a very strong, unreversible shift. And oftentimes, stories are stories, and they might get idealized, and the years that happened in between, and the further processes that happened after an awakening experiences might fall under the table somehow. And it appears to be also that for some people it is happening quite sudden and irreversible. And for others it's a more gradual process. And still, this moment of awakening will always be a moment. It can only be a moment. Maybe you don't notice it, but it can only be a moment. Because once you have truly realized that you're not the little me, you have realized it. There's no way back. This realization might get covered again, but it can never be covered so strongly as it was covered before. You cannot fall asleep again fully. You can nod off for a little while, but as I said, the foot is in the door. It is the further along you get on the path, the less easy it is to fall asleep. The more you will feel how painful it is to sleep. And that is actually something that is very seldom talked about, that it doesn't just get nicer. You become more aware of when you go wrong, so to say. When you sin, when you miss the mark, which is the original meaning of sinning. So this is awakening. After the awakening, an integration has to take place, because this, your body, your emotional body, your habits, your trauma structures, your so many things inside your manifest being are not in line and aligned with this realization. And learning to live from that space and live the truth of this realization takes a long time. Rupert Spira calls it the endless process. This unfolding, this incorporation of this knowing within the body. And it's like a cleaning up process. Like you need to clean up more and more thought patterns, emotional patterns, blockages. You can call it energetic blockages in the chakra, whatever, right? You need to do your home cleaning. And there's more progressions and steps after this first awakening. It is also very particular and not so easy to start to live from this space, to engage in life and the tasks of everyday living and of social interaction, of work, of taking care of yourself, of others, from that space, like, so to say, ego-free. Like how to live if you're not like a constricted person here protecting yourself. It sounds very romantic, and it's not so easy. So it can be a very rocky path. Actually, it is said that when you have an awakening experience, a true awakening, there is a so-called, mini satori's, mini awakenings. So you can have small awakenings before, and they can seem very profound. So maybe mini or small is the wrong word. And you can realize love and see a light and feel joyous, but they're not enlightenment as long as it's still the little me experiencing this. This is very good that I come to this topic now, because this is a big misconception. Many people experience all sorts of amazing things, maybe with taking drugs or through ritual, sex, in meditation, whatever. And it's still the little me experiencing this. It's still I have experienced it. So you cannot say I have experienced enlightenment. The I cannot wake up. The I is not the self that realizes itself. And after this realization, after enlightenment and awakening, this endless process, as Rupert Spira calls it, takes place. And Adyashanti has a beautiful book about where he takes the life of Jesus and maps it out. I think it's called Resurrecting Jesus, and uses it as a map of the spiritual path and as a map of levels of enlightenment. And I think that the final level he calls, I think it's the transfiguration. I might be mistaken. I mean, words are just words. The important thing is, like, after this awakening, like, this light starts. So first there's enlightenment, right? Maybe you see the light inside. You are awakening of realization, and then is the hard work. Maybe before, like whatever hard work, of undoing more and more blockages so that this light can actually be lived. So that you shine this light. So it's not just an inner realization, but you embody this light. And this is the much more interesting and endless path, right? And I think if you're attuned to this, you can see this in people, whether they shine. And it doesn't have to be a very radiant, very strong thing. Like, that can also be just charisma. Yeah, notice it has calmed down a little bit here. So I assume that this talk has come to an end. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.